Actually, if you were here for the pre-conference event, it's day 4 for you. And so just to say why I'm here, yesterday at the annual general meeting, which was here in this room, Marjorie and I kind of symbolically changed places. So Marjorie is now Vice President, and I'm very happy and excited to greet you as the new President of ITEFL. It is truly such an honor, and I'm so excited about these 2 years coming up. Yesterday at the History of ITEFL, I was just thinking back to my first ever ITEFL conference. I think it was 85 or 86. It was in Brighton, and it was just, for me, a mind-blowing experience. It was just so amazing to feel part of a larger community. And I think I can say without exaggeration that it really put me on the path to where I am now. And since then, I've been involved with ITEFL in various roles. I was Associates Coordinator between 2003 and 2006, and then the Coordinator of the Global Issue SIG between 2013 and 2016. So I know I dribble a little bit, but I can honestly say it would never, ever have occurred to me to stand for President. So Ellen Maley, it's all your fault. Is Ellen here somewhere in the audience? Yeah. So, but seriously, thank you so much for your encouragement. I literally wouldn't be here if you hadn't encouraged me. And so when I decided to stand for President, I had to write a brief statement, and there were 3 things that I highlighted in my statement. And these 3 things were to help make ITEFL even more international, to bring in the younger generation of teachers, and to make ITEFL a more socially responsible association. And these are still my three priorities. Just very, very briefly about who I am, for those of you who don't know me, and that's most of you. I'm a teacher. I'm a teacher trainer. I see myself as an educator. I'm an idealist. And I also happen to have been born in Hungary, so I could say I'm Eastern European or Central European, but you know, East, West, South, North, this is all a matter of perspective, I think. So I don't think this is what defines me, but yes, I'm Hungarian, and I'm also a Hungarian speaker of English. And like I said, really, really excited, really looking forward to the 2 years to my term as President. So, back to this conference, we've had 2 amazing plenaries. I was so touched by both of them, and I'm sure that this morning's plenary is going to be really just as amazing and fascinating and inspiring. So I'm going to hand over to my fellow trustee, Lou, who's going to introduce our plenary speaker.
Good morning, and welcome to the 3rd day of ITEFL 2017 in Glasgow, or the 4th day for some of those who have been attending the PCEs and the Associates Day on Monday, which might already seem like quite a while ago. Our plenary speaker for this morning is J.J. Wilson, and it's a great pleasure to introduce him to you. You may know J.J. Wilson for some of the following reasons already. He's a prolific writer and has covered many issues such as social justice in journals and anthologies before moving into the realm of ELT coursebooks. 3 of his last 4 coursebooks have won awards: How to Teach Listening, Speak Out, and also a novel, Damnificados. He has been honoured at Buckingham Palace in both 2008 and 2011 for the Duke of Edinburgh English Speaking Union Award, for Best Book, and also for Best Book for Teachers. He was shortlisted for the Ben Warren Prize for How to Teach Listening. He was also shortlisted for the British Council Innovation in ELT for Speak Out. But what do you know about him in relation to the following numbers, which link so specifically to our ITEFL context? 60, 26, and 10 zillion. And that links to an actual fact because it's on the internet and therefore is true. So 60. For those of you who have seen and read his background information and picture in the conference programme, you'll know that this doesn't relate to his age. If it does, he needs to bottle it and share it and sell it. In true IATEFL fashion, it's the number of countries that he has been to, which relates directly to the myriad of nationalities and backgrounds that we have here in our own context this morning. 26 is the number of countries that he has given either presentations, plenaries, or workshops in, ranging from Algeria to Guatemala, from Panama to Turkey. Again, reflecting the international I in IATEFL and to our own IATEFL mission of linking, developing, and supporting language teachers worldwide. And of course, last but not least, 10 zillion. This, contrary to popular belief, is not the number of you who uses coursebook Speak Out. That might be close, but it's the number of books that he claims to own. But I think that number, and in relation to books and literature, indicates his love of words and of language, and that's something that we can all relate to here this morning, that we've been talking about and sharing over the last few days, and that we'll actually continue to share and to develop as we head back out into the world of language teaching after this conference. So, without further ado, I will hand over to the well-travelled, well-versed and well-read JJ Wilson.
Hi, everybody. Good morning. Lou, thank you so much for that wonderful introduction. I barely recognize myself. You made me look so good. Thank you. Actually, I told a friend of mine I was giving this talk today, and that he's a very experienced speaker. And he said to me, you nervous? And I said, I'm okay. And he said, just remember, do not try to be witty, charming, or intelligent. Just be yourself. I said, thanks very much. Actually, it reminded me of a time my mother saw me giving an interview on television, and later she called me up. It was on YouTube. She called me up and said, that was really good, JJ. You're much more intelligent than I thought you were. Thanks, Mother. Anyway, there are some people who are so famous that they only need one name, right? I'm thinking of Madonna, Pele, Sting, and in our field, it's Jeremy, right? And it's Scott, right? And I'm not one of them, so I thought I'd start by telling you a little bit more about myself, because it's actually relevant to what I'm going to talk about, okay? I come from a place of privilege. My father he's a retired university lecturer, writer, and translator. My mother was a nurse and a walking encyclopedia. Now, you all thought Google was a recent invention, right? It wasn't. Google was born in 1940, and it was called Elizabeth Ayo Wilson. My mother knew everything. In fact, my father, he'd be sitting in his study at home, and he'd be working on his books and his translations, and he would need to fact-check, okay? He'd need to check all the information. But these were the days before the internet, right? So what he would do, he would just shout out to the kitchen where my mother was, or to the living room. He would just shout out all these random questions, like, what year was Ernest Hemingway born? 1899. Thank you. What's that Austrian veal dish? Wiener Schnitzel. Thank you. What's the capital of Lesotho? Maseru. Thank you. She simply knew everything. I think eventually he gave her a job as his secretary, although I think it might have been a tax dodge, so we won't talk too much about that. Now, unfortunately, I didn't inherit my mother's brains, but I did inherit her curiosity, which I largely sated through reading, and later through travel, as Lou mentioned. And because I was a good reader, I won a scholarship at the age of 10 to an excellent school with great facilities, great teachers. That is the privilege part. Now, as well as belonging to a community of privilege, I also belong to a community of struggle. Growing up, my colour in Britain in the 70s and 80s really was no picnic. I live in the United States now, and there, as you know, racism is still a huge, huge issue. And all of those of us who live on the chocolate side of town, we are very, very aware that beneath the civil surface, there's a deep fear of and hatred of people of color. We come from what's sometimes called a tradition of the blues. Well, what is the blues? Well, years ago, someone asked Louis Armstrong, what is jazz? And Armstrong replied, if you gotta ask, you'll never know. Well, what is the blues? You gotta ask, you'll never know. Well, the blues, according to Ellison, is this. It's an autobiographical chronicle of a personal catastrophe expressed lyrically. Now, those of us, as I said, who come from the chocolate side of town, we know catastrophe intimately, and we resist. We constantly resist, and we fight. And we don't fight alone, we fight side by side with our brown brothers and sisters. Are you there, Latinos? Are you there? We fight side by side with our yellow and red brothers and sisters. All the Asians, are you there? We fight side by side with our gay and lesbian brothers and sisters, with our differently abled brothers and sisters, and with the largest historically oppressed group of all, women. Are you there, women? I salute you. We fight side by side with you, okay? Actually, one of my favorite lines by Paulo Freire, someone I'm going to talk about later, is Quem não briga não tem futuro. Those who do not fight have no future. Okay? Now, you're probably wondering, what on earth does this have to do with English language teaching? Well, there is a connection. Why? Because all education begins with what we bring to the classroom. And I'm talking about our personal histories. I'm talking about funds of knowledge. I'm talking about cultural capital, okay? Now, none of this, when I first began teaching, really played a part until something happened to me, okay? And I'm going to tell you about it. Many, many years ago, when I was a young man, you're supposed to say, but you're still a young man. Let's try that again. Many, many years ago, when I was a young man, why, thank you, you're too kind. Okay, I was teaching in a language school in Italy, okay, a very, very conservative school, very conservative in its approach. My students, they were compliant, but they were not engaged. Now, compliant students, they answer the teacher's questions. Engaged students ask their own, okay? So I tried to bring in all these interesting things, like I brought in drama and poetry and images and art and music. And it was fine. The only problem was my director of studies didn't approve of the way I was teaching. And we had these little glass panels in the door of the classroom, and she would walk around the school, and I would see her little face peering into my room, and I knew exactly what she was thinking. She was thinking, what on earth is going on in here? Why isn't the teacher lecturing at the front of the classroom? Why are the students talking to each other? Why are they moving? Why aren't their feet nailed to the floor? Who is this radical from the chocolate side of town? And so one day she asked me to go into her office, to go and see her. And she had this bizarre office. It was this huge room with a very thick wooden door. And she actually had bolts on the door. She could lock herself in like in a dungeon. I have no idea what she did in there. Probably made potions or something. Anyway, so after school one day, I went to her office, knocked on the door, and she unbolted the door. Let me... That was a creaky wooden door, by the way. It sounded more like some kind of demented donkey, but anyway. So I walked in, and she went and sat back on her throne, and I actually said this. I said something like, "You wanted to see me, ma'am?" It was like something out of Charles Dickens. And she had a very strong Italian accent, and she said to me, "We don't teach like this. Come back again tomorrow and try again." I didn't know what to say to her. I didn't have the language, I didn't have the theory to explain why I taught the way that I taught. And so I kind of just turned around and went out the door, kind of whoosh, whoosh. That's the swishing sound of my tail between my legs, right? You know that idiom, right? It means you've been humiliated, okay. So I sort of slouched out, and I went home, and it was very depressing, actually. I was kind of upset and very sad. But when I got home, that very same day, a package had arrived in my flat, and it was a book. Okay, I could see it was a book, and a friend of mine from the United States, another teacher, had sent it to me. And I love reading, as Lou mentioned. And so I excitedly opened this package, because I really, really needed something to cheer me up. Okay, and I thought, oh, great, it's a book. And what book was it? Pedagogy of the Oppressed. Well, this is going to be a laugh a minute, isn't it? Great, Pedagogy of the Oppressed. Anyway, so I started reading this book. But then I really started reading this book. And this book, well, I consumed it in one night, or rather the book consumed me. I'd never read an educational book like this before. It was so full of passion, so full of metaphor. I mean, it's about education, but it's about other things. It's got a lot of philosophy in it. It's got anthropology. It's got issues of justice in it. And what this book allowed me to do, what this book gave me, was the language and the theory to talk about why I was doing what I was doing in the classroom. Now, as teachers, we have a slight mistrust of theory, don't we? Because we're practitioners. So on the one side, we have theory. On the other side, we have practice, right? And Michael Swan says that theory is when we know everything and nothing works. Practice is when everything works and we don't know why. Okay? And English language teaching has managed to combine the two. Nothing works and we don't know why. Okay? But that's Michael Swan, that's not me, it's Michael. Thank you, Michael. But I do know one thing. If you don't have any theory and you are a teacher, you are a little bit like, do you know those cartoon characters who are running, right? They're running, and then they run off the edge of a cliff, okay? And they're still running, their legs are still moving, and they look around, and then suddenly they look down, ah! And then that's what you're like if you're a teacher without any theory, okay? You have no grounding. There's nothing beneath your feet. And so Freire allowed me to actually verbalize what I was doing in class. Okay, let me tell you a little bit more about, well, actually, no, let me ask you. Put your hands up if you've read the whole of Pedagogy of the Oppressed. I don't mean read the reviews on Amazon. I don't mean read the first chapter. I mean read it from cover to cover. Who's read Pedagogy of the Oppressed? That's 1.6% of you, not very many. Put your hand up if you know a bit about Freire, say enough to write the first paragraph of Wikipedia entry. Okay, that's about 16.2% of you. Put your hands up if you have no idea who I'm talking about. You're very, one or two of you doing this. I'm just doing my hair. I know lots about Freire, really. Okay, well, don't worry. I'm going to tell you all about Freire. Okay, first thing I want to tell you, what is radical, firstly, is the title. It's Pedagogy of the Oppressed. It's not for the oppressed. It's because they take ownership of it, okay? They take ownership of their own resolution to their oppression. It's all about decolonization of the self. You remember the Bob Marley song, "Emancipate yourself from mental slavery, none but ourselves can free our minds." You know that? It's about that, emancipating yourself. What else is it about? He mentions the banking concept of education. Now, Sarah mentioned this in her plenary yesterday, a different kind of thing on banking. The banking concept is the teacher is the depositor, deposits the information in the student's brain, and just like a bank, you can take it out like money, okay? And of course, that's not how real education works, because education is transformation, isn't it? What else does Freire say in this book? He talks about problem posing, he talks about questioning, and he talks about dialogue. Now, I'm going to pause there, because I need to say who he is, for those of you who don't know. Paulo Freire was a Brazilian educator working in the 50s and 60s. He worked teaching literacy to poor peasant farm workers in the northeast of Brazil, okay? He was radical because he believed that the basis of all education was love, okay? Love of humans, love of nature, love of the world. And that means justice, right? Because justice is what love looks like in public. And he used whatever the students brought to class. And what did they bring? Well, they were illiterate, but they brought great knowledge of the land, of nature, of animals. They brought farm implements. They brought pitchforks and knives and axes, etc. And so he used all of that to bring them to a state of conscientização, which is a Portuguese word which means raised awareness, critical consciousness. Critical consciousness of what? Of their place in society. Now, for all his efforts, Paulo Freire was then imprisoned and exiled by the Brazilian government. Why? Because when you teach poor people how to read and write, you empower them. Because then they can read their rights, and they realize they're being oppressed, and they understand how power works. And of course, repressive governments hate this, because they just want to keep you passive, okay? So this is what Freire did. Let me move on, talk about another thing he mentions in his book. He talks about praxis. Praxis is the bringing together of reflection, or kind of theory, and then action, taking action, okay? And it all comes from that line in Karl Marx. Marx said, the philosophers have only interpreted the world. The point is to change it. I'll give you an example of praxis, actually. There's a professor in the States. His name is Julio Camarota. Actually, he's been in the States a long time, so he's probably now called Julio Camarota. And he goes into prisons, and he gives workshops in prisons. And one day, he was giving a workshop with the inmates about why so many African-American men are incarcerated, okay? He posed this question. And they brainstormed, and they came up with lots of ideas, okay? It's because of racist laws, racist policemen, it's because of substance abuse. But they decided the number one reason, lack of education. So that was the reflection, that was the theory. But then they put it into action because they petitioned the prison authorities to bring in a course that would allow them to get an associate's degree. And they kept on petitioning, and finally it happened. And now they can earn a degree in San Quentin prison, you see. That's an example of praxis, okay? What else? Education is the practice of freedom. That was what he believed. He also, well, I talked about conscientisation. He also has this statement, education starts from students' experiences, and it either reinforces or it challenges the status quo. And he also talks about teacher as co-learner, okay? So these were the things. So those of you who haven't read Pedagogy of the Oppressed, you don't need to read it now. It's all up there. Just take a photo of the slide. Now, I'm going to talk about social justice, and Freire is obviously a huge influence. Social justice is a massive topic. It covers so much, and we really don't have time. And also, you want to know the secret of being boring? Say everything. And I don't have time, and I don't want to bore you. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to address 3 questions. What is social justice? What does social justice have to do with English language teaching? And how are we qualified to teach social justice in the classroom? Okay. First question, what is it? Well, it's contested. It's culturally specific. In many nations, if you criticize the government, you get locked up, and that is considered justice. Okay? It's also constantly changing. Within our lifetimes, little Aborigine children in Australia, they were taken away from their families. They were put in camps where they were educated on how to serve the dominant white elite, and that was considered justice. It was considered just, a good thing for them. You go back in history, same thing happened to Native Americans, right? When they weren't being exterminated, they were put in camps, and they were taught to assimilate with the white majorities, and this was considered just. It was the liberals who wanted this to happen. So that was considered justice. So it changes. Actually, some of you might know this story. Mahatma Gandhi, the first time he visited the West, a journalist asked him, "What do you think of Western civilization?" And Gandhi replied, "I think it would be a good idea." Other things. Social justice affects all areas of human life. Okay, our most basic physiological needs, breathing, drinking water, they are affected by issues of social justice. Millions of people do not have clear air to breathe, do not have clean water to drink, okay? Water wars have been going on for tens of thousands of years, as we know. I tried to come up with a definition of social justice. It's a world which affords individuals and groups fair treatment and an impartial share of the benefits of society. Second question, what does social justice have to do with English language teaching? Surely our job is just to teach the present perfect 6 times a day until our students keel over and fall unconscious. And then we start on the 3rd conditional, right? Okay, well, It depends on your view of the educator's role in society. We all know that students learn a lot more than we teach. Well, sometimes they learn a lot less, actually. But they learn different things from what we teach. I'm sure you all know the old joke. Two teachers are in the staff room at the end of the day, and one says to the other, "What did you do in class?" And the other one says, "Well, I did the present perfect. I don't know what the students did." So, teachers also model social justice in the classroom. The third question, how are we qualified to teach social justice in the classroom? Well, a very simple answer, we aren't. Because it isn't a body of knowledge, okay? It's an approach. It's an approach to materials, to students, and all the apparatus of education, rules, norms, classrooms, schools, technology, etc. I really want to stress that I'm not telling anybody how to teach. I really don't want to proselytize, to preach to you. I'm just throwing some ideas in the air and hoping some of you will catch them. Against proselytizing, there have been many great thinkers and writers who've said, language teaching is teaching language, Mike Swan. Avoid teaching out of a religious conversion-motivated zeal, Julian Edge. Avoid the nurturer of souls approach. This is Nick Gadd in a well-known essay. Students, this is Doug Brown, students must be free to be themselves, to behave intellectually without coercion from a powerful elite, to cherish their beliefs, traditions and cultures without the threat of forced change. Okay, so we must be careful when we bring issues of social justice to the classroom. Having said that, those of you who are interested, I want to ask this question. What might social justice issues in the classroom look like? Okay, I'm going to move on to a more practical part of today's talk. Can you put your hand up if you are involved in making or creating things? Do you make art or jewelry? Do you write for pleasure? Do any of you make films? Do any of you make music? Just put your hand up. Wow, that's 62% of us. We should start a collective. That's amazing. We can be the Glasgow IATEFL Creative SIG or something. That's fantastic. Well, you are all involved in pushing the frontiers of the human imagination. You're all involved in seeing beauty in places where other people don't even look. And a lot of what I'm going to talk about in the second half of the talk concerns making things, creating things, interpreting things. Okay, I'm going to look at 6 different areas, 6 different modes or ways to bring social justice into the classroom. And I'm going to start with images. Freire used images all the time because obviously his students were illiterate, and so they started with images. Now, I'm going to do something very, very risky, teachers, and Sarah did this, and it worked, so I'm hoping it's going to work for me. Take out a pen and paper, everybody. Take out a pen and paper. What are you going to do? You're going to illustrate an issue that you are passionate about, and you have about 45 seconds. Wave if you're finished. Oh, fantastic. Okay, now what I'd like to do is this. Find a partner who looks particularly intelligent and friendly. Got one? Easy? Okay. Now, compare what you drew, and you have just 1 minute between you. Just explain what you drew, and teachers, how is this issue represented in your work? Okay? Okay, everybody, I'm going to try Sarah's trick. Thank you, Sarah. It worked. Fantastic. Thank you, everybody. Last thing I want you to do, lift up your picture. Show it to the people around you. You got 10 seconds to ask any questions. Show it to the people around you. Okay, everybody. Okay, let me tell you about another activity I've done using images, okay? Many years ago, when I was a young man... You're still a young man. You're such fast learners. That's why you're IATEFL. You're the smart people. Okay, thank you. There was an exhibition, a photography exhibition by Sebastião Salgado. He's a great photographer. He's been to every troubled spot on the planet, wherever there was war, genocide, famine. He went there and he took photographs. And I took a group of students to see this exhibition, and we looked around, and I'll just show you. This is a mine in Brazil, famine. This is one of the camps after the genocide in Rwanda. He basically takes photographs of oppressed peoples, and we looked at these. We went back to the classroom. We took a globe, we took the map of the world, and the students researched particular areas and particular issues and gave short presentations. And I remember there's a documentary on Sebastião Salgado. He speaks in French, and I remember at one point he says, "L'homme est un animal féroce. Notre histoire est une histoire de guerre." Man is a ferocious animal. Our history is the history of war. Okay? And what we did was, after the students did their presentations, we just talked about these issues, and it was a way of bringing in issues of social justice into the classroom. And one of the students said it was one of the most powerful learning experiences he'd ever had, and I think it shows the power of images. I'm going to do something a little similar with you. This is classrooms around the world, okay? I'm just going to show you some photos of classrooms around the world from Washington Post. All you have to do with your friendly, intelligent partner at first is say, where are these taken, okay? Oh, by the way, unlike George Bush, I hope you all know Africa is not a country, okay? You have to name the country. Name the country, okay? Do you know the one on the top left? Do you know that one? Who can make a guess? Ivory Coast. What about the top right? One on the top right. Make a guess. Not China. It's Vietnam. What about this one? Bottom left. Afghanistan. Yes. Bottom right. Anyone know? Brazil. It's Brazil. Yes. What about the one on the top left? It's Pakistan. It's a school that this man founded for underprivileged children. The one on the top right? It's not Lesotho. It's Kenya. Bottom left. Nope. Good guess. Morocco. Bottom right. Colombia. Britain? No, Colombia. Okay. Next thing I'd like you to do with your friendly, intelligent partner, you're going to make sentences about the pictures that begin with the words, I wonder. I wonder. Don't write them, just say. You've got 1 minute for each slide. Okay, so you've got 1 minute to make I wonder sentences. For example, I wonder if the children use textbooks. I wonder if there's electricity. Okay? Speaking only, 1 minute. Okay, next set of pictures. Same thing, same thing. 1 minute, I wonder, okay? Okay, time up. Teachers, I just want to show you what I did with a group of teachers. We did the same thing. They made I wonder, and then we turned the I wonder sentences into questions. And this is some of what we had, some of the questions we ended up with. And then we categorized them, okay? And I'll just show you what the categories are. What materials did they use? Did the children have enough books? So what category is that? It's materials. Do they have electricity? What technology do they have? What is the role of technology in the classroom? What's the category? It's technology. Don't they get bitten by mosquitoes? Do they always study outside? What happens when it rains? Is this school a boat or an actual school? Does a classroom need walls? That's about the school environment, isn't it? How many children are in the class? Can children learn if they can't move around? It's about the children. And the final category, why aren't there pictures on the walls? Did the students decorate the classroom? It's about the decoration. And what we did, we divided up the teachers into groups. There was a red group, a brown group, green group, blue group, purple group. And they discussed their questions. Then we intermingled the groups so everyone was discussing all of the questions. And inevitably, it brought up issues of justice. Then we finished it off by talking about an ideal school, okay? And they made lots of great suggestions. They wanted to have a garden that would be tended by the students, and they would eat the vegetables and the fruit. Some of them wanted chickens, not in the school, but we would eat their eggs. They wanted to decorate the school with murals and mosaics that were made by the students. They wanted dance performances. Does that look like your staff room, by the way? Dancing teachers. They wanted lots and lots of free coffee, really good coffee. They wanted music. Music is the language that crosses all boundaries. And they wanted lots of really good free coffee. Did I mention that already? And they also wanted lots of drama performances done in English with great facilities, and they wanted lots of free coffee. Did I mention the coffee? Yes, I think I mentioned the coffee. The beautiful thing is, all of these things already exist in schools around the world, don't they? Except for the good free coffee. Okay, yeah. So that's images. I want to move on to poetry and literature. I'm actually going to read you a poem, and you're going to repeat. I'm going to read line by line. You're going to repeat every line, okay? This is your intonation practice, teachers, okay? And the poem is called Remembering. Okay, are we ready? You're going to repeat every line, remembering. I remember touching snowdrops, angels' kisses. I remember VW Beetles with wind-up windows. I remember JFK and JR and who shot who. I remember Thriller and Michael Jackson when he was black. I remember fish and chip nights with mushy peas. Yuck! I remember John Travolta when he was cool. I remember VCRs and cassettes and Sony Walkmans. I remember crazy days, long nights, happiness. Thank you, you're marvelous, fantastic. Well done, everybody. Listen, that is based on, oh, that's nice. That's based on a poem called Remembering by a good friend of mine called Jeremy Page. And I've used this with students, and what they do is they just write their own poems. Every stanza begins with I remember, and then we talk about what has changed since you were a kid and why. We talk about changes in society, and it's a very indirect way of bringing in social justice issues to the classroom, because of course it is actually problematizing. I'm going to read you one more poem. I'll show you one more poem, and if any of you have ever seen me speak before, you'll know I always try and bring this poem to my presentation because I've found it such a great learning tool for students and teachers. And it's called an I Am From poem. And I'm going to show this one, which was written by a very high-level, non-native speaker teacher. Here we go. I am from. I am from the stormy sea and the ceaseless north wind, from endless summer afternoons on the porch. I am from a house with open doors, a yard filled with good memories and fruit trees. I'm from the south and from relationships, from grandma's stories on cold winter nights. I am from Sunday pasta and cafezinhos, from loud discussions at the lunch table, surrounded by loved ones. I am from Jorge Amado stories and geographical differences, from mango trees and white sands. I am from fragments of my childhood interrupted overnight, from shadows of the past and ghosts of the present. I am from Laguna, land of Anita Garibaldi, the heroine of two worlds, the fearless woman. I am from Nevis and Bonanza, mountains and the sea. I am from a mix of beliefs, words without translation. I am from the immensity of the world. What do you think? Good poem? Well, for those of you who don't know, I'm going to let you into a little secret here. I like this poem so much that I married the writer. There were a few other reasons as well, but I'm not going to go into that. Okay, and it's an I am from poem. This is the structure. It's not just I am from Quito or London, whatever, is it? It's I am from objects, sounds, words, people, smells, tastes, memories. And the students choose their most vivid 10 or 15, and then they use them. And each sentence of the poem begins with I am from. It's a great teaching tool. If we remember, all education begins with what the students bring to class. And this is a great tool for showing it. Okay, I'm going to move on. You're taking your photos? Can I be in them? Okay, here we go. Drama. Hands up if you use role play in class. Excellent. Great way of bringing in social justice issues. But I'm actually going to talk about this guy, Augusto Boal, who founded the Theatre of the Oppressed. Boal worked around the same time as Freire. He's kind of a cousin of Freire. He's not a literal cousin, but what he was doing was similar to Freire. He's a theatre director, he was, and he had a travelling theatre that worked in the northeast of Brazil. And he founded Theatre of the Oppressed based on a very humiliating experience for him. And what he did was this. He had this play, and at the end of the play, all the actors, they sing this revolutionary song, and they lift up their stage guns, okay? And so they did this, and the audience was all kind of, yes, this is fantastic. And at the end, the audience asked them, will you come and join us in the fight against this tyrannical landlord who's been tyrannizing? He's terrible, this horrible landlord. And Augusto Boal was, no, you don't realize these guns are made of plastic. They are stage props. They don't have real bullets. The songs my actors were singing are just part of the performance, okay? And of course the audience, you know that sound that a balloon makes when the air goes out of the balloon? Can you make it for me? Make that sound of a balloon. It's kind of... The audience trooped out, miserable, okay, and went on to struggle with their lives. From that day onwards, Augusto Boal never again directed a play in which there was a happy ending with social justice achieved. No, he didn't do that. What did he do? He invented forum theatre. Forum theatre looks at issues of oppression. It's a short sketch, and they do it twice. The first time, they do it with a resolution. The second time, they leave it up to the audience to decide what the resolution will be. And he took this around the northeast of Brazil, and one time, a woman in the audience suggested how to resolve the issue of oppression, but the actor couldn't get it right. So the woman got up on stage and said, "Get off, actor." She pushed the actor out of the way, and she did it herself. Brazilians are like this, by the way. I'm married to one. They're crazy. I mean, if you mess up, you know about it. And they come and they do it with the government as well, actually. It's great. And so Boal realized he had to dissolve the distance between spectator and actor. And so he invented spectactors, okay, who could play a part in the drama. He also invented hundreds and hundreds of games-sizes, which demechanize the self. We're all very mechanized. We do the same physical movements all the time. And he wanted to stretch us, our body and our minds, okay? And Boal's work is really based on the dual meanings of to act. To act is a theatrical performance, of course, but it's also to take action in the world and thereby transform the world, okay? Anyway, I don't really have time to go into all these exercises, etc., so I just suggest this book, Games for Actors and Non-Actors. It's full of games exercises. I got to move on. Community projects. Okay, some of the methods. The methods we use are the methods of anthropological inquiry. For example, oral histories, bearing witness. So we might film, we record, we photograph, we measure, we use interview techniques. Also, community projects often have an element of service learning, making yourself useful to underserved communities. Now, obviously, one of the things I love about IATEFL, there are so many great community projects. I'm only going to mention a couple. Hands Up Project with Nick. Urban Chronicles a few years ago with Paul Driver. Gisele Santos in Brazil, she gets the school children that she teaches to use recycled materials to make toys for kids the very poor kids in the favelas. And they then make a little presentation in English about how they made these toys. It's a great community project. Anyway, if you're more interested, look at GISIG, Global Issues SIG, for more ideas, okay? I need to keep rushing. I need to keep moving on. Okay, you taking your photos? All right. Teachable moments. I'm going to tell you about two. Belvedere, Illinois, 1990. Little schoolboy looks out the window. What does he see? He sees this. He sees a dumpster full of trash. And he asks the teacher, where does all the trash go? The teacher arranges a field trip to a landfill site. Put your hands up if you've been to a landfill site. It is an enormous mountain full of trash. The children were so shocked by what they saw at this landfill site that when they got back to school, they started a recycling project in the school. The recycling project took hold, and it's been going for 27 years, okay, this recycling. And that all came out of a question, didn't it? Where does the trash go? One question, one answer, one concerted effort to take action. And that's how we change the world, isn't it? It's just piece by piece by piece. Perfect example of praxis. My second example, several decades ago, local news. There was a whale stranded, washed up on the beach. Okay, it was in local news. What did the teacher do? He arranged a field trip to the beach so the children could see this whale. And years later, Wadsworth wrote this. He was one of the children. We looked at it. We listened to it. We went up to it to touch it. It couldn't move much. We ran away from it when it opened its massive mouth. We threw water on it. We made faces at it. We did all sorts of things. From that day on, we all knew exactly what a whale was. What a great piece of teaching to take the children. How do children know whales? They just look in books and see pictures, right? Can you imagine being a little child and touching it and smelling a whale? Incredible. If I'd been their teacher, I would have asked, how did the whale end up stranded on the beach? Was it something to do with pollution of the oceans? Climate change? Was it man's use of sonar disorienting the whale? Okay, let me move on. The last one, most important of all. I'm going to illustrate this one by telling you a story. When Reagan was president, he announced that there was only enough nuclear waste in 1 year to fit under his desk. He was wrong by a factor of about 1 to 100. Okay? So the Department of Energy had a problem. They needed to find a place to put all their nuclear waste. So they planned to bury it all under Yucca Mountain in Nevada. Okay? Well, they got involved, this guy called Thomas Sebeok, who was he's a linguist. And they told him of their plans, okay? They said, okay, we're going to bury the nuclear waste here, but the problem is we need to warn people about it. Because, as you know, nuclear waste remains radioactive for 10,000 years, okay? So they said, all right, we're going to put up lots of signs in different languages. And he said, that's no good. There are no languages that last 10,000 years. And also, there are no signs. The signs will fall down, okay? They said, okay, we'll put up lots of flashing lights, okay, so people will know. He said, no, that's no good. You need a power source for flashing lights. There are no power sources that last 10,000 years. And they said, what about solar power? And they said, you're going to put up a panel, it's going to be destroyed in 10,000 years. So then they said, okay, we're going to build really big buildings to warn people not to go near Yucca Mountain. He said, no, what buildings last 10,000 years? So eventually they said, look, smartass, what are we going to do? And he said, this is what you're going to do. You're going to start an atomic priesthood of elders who are going to pass on a legend. not to go near the mountain. Okay? They're going to tell the next generations, do not go near the mountain. And this legend will be passed on from generation to generation to generation. And it might just last 10,000 years, so people will know not to go near the mountain. Now, what interests me about this is that despite all the new technology we have, which barely lasts for 10 years, let alone 10,000 years, Thomas Sebeok, the linguist, he decided that the best technology of all was the oldest, the most enduring, stories. Stories predate literacy, don't they? They came about before there was writing, before there was paper. Stories have been around for as long as we've been around. The question is, what kind of stories can we use to teach social justice? And for me, the answer is we use stories of ordinary people doing great things. How much resilience and creativity is in ordinary people. You know, do you remember Gabriel talked about Eduardo Galeano? You remember the horizon and utopia? Well, another thing Galeano talked about was, he talked about la grandeza escondida en las cosas chiquitas, the greatness hidden in small things. But he also meant small people, the ordinary people. They have greatness inside them because they're so resilient against great odds. And I once had an argument with an editor about this because we wanted to do a lesson on social justice issues. And I wanted to use people who are unknown. And my editor wanted to use Sting and Bono, probably because they're so famous they only need one name, right? But I said, well, I thought, why are we still peddling the myth that it takes rich, white, Western celebrities to save the developing world when there are so many people in the developing world saving themselves? And so that's what okay, thank you. Those are my feelings, anyway, about using stories. I don't know about you, I couldn't teach without stories. I certainly couldn't be a writer without stories. They're the most essential tool of all. On that note, I'm actually going to finish by telling you a story, true story. Last year, I had the great fortune to befriend and spend a couple of days with Juan Felipe Herrera, who is the Poet Laureate of the United States. And Juan Felipe told me this story. He comes from a very humble background. His parents were migrant farm workers. That means they just crisscrossed the United States, picking fruit depending on the season, okay? And Juan, when he was a child, he didn't speak any English. All he spoke was Spanish. And he was taken to a school, and he went to this school, and he really, really struggled. It was in California, because he couldn't speak the language. And he would sit in the corner with no friends. And one day, his teacher, Mrs. Sampson, and I always think of her as being a very strong woman with long hair, because she's called Samson, right? She asked him, well, she said to him, Juan, I noticed you like music. And Juan sort of nodded, and then she said, would you like to sing for us? Juan was terrified, but she managed to persuade him to sing. And when he did, everyone was amazed. And then he sat down, and his teacher, Mrs. Sampson, said, Juan, you have a beautiful voice. Now, if you want to know where teaching for social justice begins, that's as good a place to start as any. You have a beautiful voice. On that note, I want to thank you all for listening. Thank you very much, and enjoy the rest of the conference.
I would just like to say a very, very big thank you to JJ for such a wonderful plenary, and for on day 3 and on day 4 for some of us of such a fully packed conference, for getting us re-energized again. So thank you once again, that was great. The follow-up session for the plenary will take place this afternoon at 4:45, so at 16:45 in Argyle 1.